Hello everybody, welcome back to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today I'm going to be recapping Phase 1 of the Copenhagen Major. So, one phase down, the GSL style group stage, and 2 more to go, Swiss and then the playoffs, but again, we'll get there when we get there. We do already have the bracket for Swiss, so I'll show that at the end, and bracket's not technically the right word, but we have the initial matchups anyways. So starting in groups here, Group A, keep in mind all of this stuff up here is best of ones, the stuff down here is best of 3, and the order that they played them in, they played these 2, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one, okay? That might not be the order I talk about them. I'll probably group all the best of ones together and then the best of 3s. So Sandbox take down Fury, that could have gone either way, 7-5 win. Same thing, Falcons versus M&M. Bit of an upset there, especially considering Falcons, as I understand it, are playing with a substitute, playing with their coach rather than their main IGL. I think a lot of teams can sort of survive without their IGL anymore. Teams have a lot more of a fluid structure, but still, if you have a dedicated IGL or at least a main shot caller, it always hurts to lose them. And obviously, losing any player on your roster isn't optimal. But they do take down M&M. The first round of each group actually gets more decisive as we go. There's like 10 round wins here for the losers, and then it just gets worse and worse as we advance. Falcons take down Sandbox 7-4, and they advance as the first seed out of the group. Fury lose to M&M, M&M winning 2-1, and then M&M winning 2-0 over Sandbox. I think M&M a little bit worse in the group stage than people expected, certainly losing to Falcons. I don't think it was the biggest upset ever. If you're not like a diehard fan of Siege, you probably don't even recognize Falcons. They're sort of new to T1 with the regional restructuring. And you probably do recognize M&M. They've become a little bit of a staple as far as international competition goes. One of the teams that's gone to a good number of events in the last year and a half. But Falcons, I think people know that they are definitely the best team out of the region and maybe an underrated region. We'll see what they do going forward. Maybe they'll even get more representation. But anyways, I said M&M didn't live up to expectations, and maybe that's not just based on this game. They lost 1 map to Fury, and I'm looking at it elsewhere. It's not on the screen here, but I'll tell you the round counts. 7-3 win for Fury on Skyscraper. Doesn't look great, and M&M losing their a map to Falcons and then a map to Fury right after that. Not looking great, but they do win the next 2. 7-1 win on Chalet is great. Generally M&M's best map. And then they win 8-6 on Oregon. So they have to go to overtime. Had they lost in overtime, they're out of the event. Fury continues through. So a little bit of a scare there against Fury. And then against Sandbox, it's less close. It's a 2-0. They get a 7-1 on Villa. So another 7-1 is quite good. A couple of dominant maps for them. But then they go 7-5 on Clubhouse, and they win without overtime, obviously. But they're up, or rather they're down 3-5, and then M&M win 4 in a row. So I think Sandbox very easily could have secured Clubhouse, and then we would have seen what would have happened on Oregon. But M&M with a few scares here and there, and a lot of people probably thought they would be first out of the group, and pretty much nobody could say that M&M wasn't going to make it out of the group, first or second seed, but still maybe some closer calls than they would have liked. And then in Group B, we have 6 Karma beating Ninjas in Pajamas. This is probably the biggest upset of the first round of groups. I don't think there were any like massive upsets in who made it through and who didn't. I think it's actually all 8 teams that I predicted. As far as predictions go for the first group, though, I had M&M, Falcons, and then I think I had Sandbox Fury, so I had the top 2 flipped, and I got the other 2 right. In this group, I had Space Station, Nip. I think I had 6 Karma Elevate, so I actually got this group completely right. Elevate, I believe, playing with at least 1 sub, if not more than 1, and they're not really the Elevate that people have come to know. It's a new team now, not the Thai roster, but now a little bit of an Asian hodgepodge, and so I don't think people really had big expectations for them. I don't think they were the worst team in the tournament, but obviously they weren't great. But again, 6 Karma, yeah, beating Nip, the biggest upset of the group stage probably, and Space Station taking down Elevate. They should have been more decisive. Space Station went up 6-0, but then they allowed Elevate to get 4 rounds, and I guess it was just a very defender-sided Oregon, but Space Station does close it out, and then Space Station 7-5, 6 Karma. A bit close of a match, but still Space Station wins without overtime. I don't think we saw any overtime actually in any of the best of ones. I think it was all non-overtimes, and then we saw a few OTs in the best of 3s. But speaking of the best of 3s, Ninjas in Pajamas 2-0ing Elevate. It was a 7-5, 7-3, so Elevate not getting completely smashed, but, they got 3 rounds, 4 rounds, and 5 rounds on the 3 maps that they played. It's something, but it's obviously not amazing. You'd like to at least win a map, even if you're going to get instantly eliminated. And then Ninjas in Pajamas get the run back against 6 Karma, and boy, do they get their revenge. They only got 3 rounds against 6 Karma here, but then they win 7-2, 7-2. They didn't allow 6 Karma to get 3 rounds on either of those maps, and Ninjas in Pajamas advance. And again, I believe this is what I predicted for this group. In Group C, we have Revan beating Northeption 7-3, Sonics beating La Vega 7-2. So still not the most decisive group. The next group, the losers only get 3 rounds in the first round. So it'll be more decisive than this, but it doesn't get too much more decisive than this. Only 5 rounds between 2 maps for the losers. Revan lose to Sonics, so Sonics win 7-4. A cakewalk for Sonics, but also not the biggest cakewalk of anybody. It looked like it should have been on paper, but one team from the next group outdoes them in this regard. So Sonics advance. I don't think it was reasonable to put any team besides Sonics as the first seed out of this group, but I did go with Revan, and then I really don't remember if I had Northeption or La Vega as 3rd and 4th. I think maybe La Vega than Northeption, but I could have had them flipped. So maybe I got this group completely right. Maybe I had the bottom 2 flipped, but regardless, I got the 2 teams advancing right, and Revan very nearly didn't advance. But I guess let's talk about Northeption first versus La Vega. It was a pretty severe drubbing, 7-3, 7-1. So maybe the biggest drubbing out of all of the best of 3s. Only 4 rounds for La Vega is pretty brutal. They were probably the worst performing team of any team. They only got 6 rounds on the board the whole event. Not great. And then Revan versus Northeption. This was probably the most exciting match of the group phase. The final map in particular. So 7-1 win for Northeption on Skyscraper, and looking like it might be a cakewalk for them. But then Revan bounced back with a 7-4 on Oregon, and then an 8-7 win for Revan on Chalet, map 3. It went all 15 rounds, and I think Revan were even the team that was down for a lot of regulation. If I remember, I think they had to push OT. And then, it goes all 15 rounds. It comes down to, I think, a 1v1. It's like a 1v2, and then the team with only 1 player, I think it was Northeption, gets a kill, but then they lose on time. And yeah, quite a map. If you go back and watch one map, it's probably that one. Not the highest caliber of Siege, but really, really exciting map. And again, it's Sonics and Revan advancing from that group. And then finally, Group D, only 3 rounds won. Like I was saying before, Bliss gets 1 round, Donuts Vero gets 2. But I think this was probably the easiest group to call. Very clearly W7M and Wolves making it out. Maybe you thought they would be flipped, but I think W7M was definitely the favorite. Wolves as number 2, and then Vero, Bliss. I really don't know. I don't even remember which order I did them in. I think maybe Bliss, Vero, but maybe, I don't know. Maybe I got this one right. Maybe I got those 2 flipped again. But I basically got the whole group stage right. Again, at least as far as the top half and the bottom half go. W7M beating Wolves 7-4. I think that's about an expected result. I think there were some questions about W7M. Obviously, they didn't go straight to phase 2. Maybe they're not the powerhouse that they were before, but they retained their core, KZ, JV, and Herds, and they replaced Julio and Volps with Nade and Felipox. It's still unclear if that was a side grade, an upgrade, a downgrade, but I think, especially with the Julio change, Julio is not a terrible player, but if you need a fragger, it's probably not going to be Julio, but he wasn't playing in a fragging role. The biggest thing he brought was certainly experience, and everybody on this roster, or at least the 3 players being retained, are pretty well seasoned at this point, been playing for a while, played a lot of international competitions, so you probably don't need the veteran presence of Julio anymore. And so maybe even if you think that any player almost is a downgrade from Volps, maybe overall you think it was an upgrade. Perhaps. We'll see. We'll see what they do going forward. It's going to be really hard to best their performance from last year, but if they start out better than they did in Charlotte, it's entirely possible, because that was their worst performance last year, and that was the first major last year. This is the first major this year. We'll see what happens. Let's talk about the lower bracket matches. Veryl takes down Bliss 2-1, and let me look at it really quickly. It's a 7-3 for Veryl map 1, 8-7 win for Bliss map 2, and 7-4 win for Veryl map number 3. So Bliss did get a map, but it was in round 15. Veryl won the other 2 maps in regulation, so pretty clearly the better team there. And then Wolves taking down Veryl 2-0, and Veryl only gets 6 rounds, so not especially close. Not the final match chronologically of the group phase, but I guess the last one we're talking about. And again, yeah, W7M Wolves were pretty clearly the favorites. I think this would have been a really big shakeup if we saw either of them not advancing. Okay, so that does it for the group phase. We're gonna look at some stats and then the initial matchups for phase number 2. Okay, CGG, we're just going to group things by the teams so that we can examine this through a little bit different of a lens. Some teams I'm gonna breeze by, particularly the teams that got eliminated, but what are you gonna do? They are mostly APAC, and in fact, all 7 APAC teams from phase 1 got eliminated. No APAC team won a series against a non-APAC team. They won a map here and there in the best of 3s, but again, APAC didn't beat any other region, and only 1 non-APAC team was eliminated because at least one had to be. There were only 7 APAC teams 8 teams eliminated overall. Anyways, Sandbox, Mephi, the only impressive player here, pretty good stats, I guess, at least in terms of KD and cost, and then everybody else sort of struggling. On M&M, the pretty well expected structure of Tyrant uses Ansolotov on top with Nafe and Nello a decent bit behind. These are the two pretty much hard support players. Nello, the main planter, but Nafe still getting some plants down. Nello, the main hard breacher, but Nafe still playing hard breach. And then Nafe even being the main smoke player, whereas Nello is like the IGL. And then I guess these three all sort of do entry. Solotov definitely the main entry, but the other two each getting their licks in. I'd say uses and Solotov higher. They're better players on average than Tyrant. Usually he's like in the third slot, maybe even does worse than one of these two. But he has certainly a lower floor, I'd say, than either of those two players, but he might also have a higher ceiling. I think he's probably one of the highest ceiling players in the world. If I remember right, he still holds the record for most kills in a best of 3. And it wasn't at a major, but it was at like a qualifier. It was quite a while ago. I don't remember, but I made a video on it, and it was like 50 something, 55 kills, something insane. So Tyrant can certainly pop off, and he definitely did so here. I guess he got out-fragged by Uses and Solotov, and the entry scoreline isn't even as impressive, but the higher, survival rate, much higher survival rate, and a better cost puts him above the other two. On Wolves, Mowgli and Deadshot, the two entries doing pretty well here, but Bibu and Shinka also doing well, sort of the two support players, and I believe P4 more of the flex player nowadays. It was, I think, Rise before on flex with P4 on entry before they had Deadshot. And I guess P4 is the IGL now. I'm not 100% sure if he was always the IGL. I thought it was maybe Bibu, but I don't know. Was it always P4? If you're aware, do comment below. I am interested to hear that. But yeah, Bibu continues to put up really good stats considering the roles he plays. Not always, but you can't always put up crazy stats on the Thermite. Shinka, a really good support player, and Deadshot certainly getting some redemption for a really poor debut in T1. He had a pretty rough group stage, but he did pretty well in the qualifiers to get them here, and pretty well here as well. On Barrel, Kawa, Caillou, Okamesh doing okay, Rento and DD not as well. Especially brutal that their, I guess, main entry player did this badly, or at least, I don't know. I assume he was intended to be the main entry. He has a lot more than everyone else, but sort of a brutal showing by Varel. Falcons, Joker and Okills, probably the two biggest names on this roster, but P9 and Valentino doing well as well. Madskill struggling a little bit, but you can't be too mad when you're still the first seed out of your group. W7M, KZ, Herds, JV2, so the three veteran players to this team really popping off, especially KZ, the best player of the group stage, only played 2 maps, so maybe he would have been brought down to earth a little bit if he'd played more, but didn't need to. Herds, I think in the second map in particular, really popped off. JV, solid, but Nade and Fellapox, solid as well. No sore spots here on W7M. 6 Karma, I think look for these guys in the future. They are probably the best team out of LATAM, not Brazil, but LATAM. So maybe they have a chance in the future, but getting their reps in while they can. Only 4 maps played, but they were still in the final, right? They won their first best of 1, lost the next best of 1, and then lost a final best of 3 to get eliminated. And Ninjas and Pajamas, the ones that eliminated them. Great to see Psycho on top, just an absolute legend of the game, been playing for such a long time, by far the longest standing member of this roster. A world champion along with Pino and Muzi a few years ago. Wizard and Cons a little bit newer, but yeah, always good to see the old dogs putting in good numbers, but nobody putting up bad numbers. Cons on the bottom as the hard support player, 5 plants, but still lowest rated player, 1.05. And these guys weren't even the top seed out of the group. SSG was above them, but still great stats all around. Revan, these guys made out of their group, but their highest rated player, 1.0. I expect them to get pretty well crushed going into Swiss, but you don't play best of 3s until you're in an elimination match. So if they win 3 best of 1s, they go to top 8, they go to playoffs. We'll see if that actually happens. Probably not, but you never know. These guys are kind of maniacs. North Eption, Nina, really, really impressive. In terms of expectations versus reality, Nina really popped off. I think some people did have their eyes on this player, but still, APAC is just not in the spotlight as much as the other regions are. But the most kills on the group stage, not the highest KPR, but the most kills, also played, the most maps, tied with some other teams. Teams played anywhere from 2 to 6 maps, and you had a possibility of up to 7 depending on what happened, but that didn't happen for any team. Shureep and Seo-chan doing pretty well as well. Yukiz and Feebar not as well. On Space Station, Merc, Hot and Cold, and J90 doing well. Forrest and Fultz not quite as well, but still only played 2 maps. First seed of the group, can't complain too much. Hot and Cold and J90 were top 3 rated in NAL for Space Station specifically. And Fultz was up there, but now Fultz and Merc sort of trade places. Forrest, the only player to be in the bottom 2 both times. So a little bit of a struggle for him, but I guess he's the IGL and he's not like the hard support player, but still playing smoke as the IGL, like, has the most plants. Definitely cut the guy some slack. He's proven himself to be a phenomenal player in the past. Hopefully he pops off in their upcoming games. Gunner, the top player on Sonics. Not many players in North America get more shit than Gunner, but it's great to see him popping off here. Almost a 2.0 KD, positive on the on entry, and only funnily enough, only Gunner and Geo actually positive on entry. The other players that you'd expect to be were not. But yeah, Gunner, great performance, but Rexen, Grixer, Citizen, none of them doing badly. Even Geo, the hard support player, went positive here. Yeah, good showing by Sonics all around, but again, only 2 maps played. They still have a lot to prove to show that they're an absolute top dog, even if they're already in top 16 of the major. Fury, what can you say? I9, formerly known as Napew, used to be on Elevate, but he did okay. So did Lycolis. Dark doing also okay. Crit J and BG Man sort of struggling there. Team Bliss, Oda, the standout player here. 1.10 rating, nobody else doing that well. Elevate, Ape, spelled ape, but I guess pronounced Ape. This standout here, nobody else doing that well. I guess these two doing okay. The other 2 players not doing very well, especially Spacehead. And then La Vega, 1 player with an even rating, even on kills, but everybody else struggling pretty notably. 100% headshot rating on this guy. He had 11 kills. Some number of those could have been like explosive kills, so I don't know if it was 11 headshots, but all of his gun kills were a headshot, so that is something at the very least. And okay, that does it for the stats. Here we have the Swiss bracket, and the initial matchups is all we're really looking at here. Keep in mind, this will all also be best of 1s except for these 2 matches, these 3 matches, and these 3 matches. So 8 best of 3s, everything else best of 1s. Looking at the initial matchups, it's all the teams that auto-qualified for Phase 2 from their regions versus the teams that just qualified for Phase 2 via the groups. And there's a lot of first seeds versus second seeds, but not strictly all. Scars and D+, formerly Damon Kia, are technically both first seeds from their regions. And I guess Scars is playing first seed. W7M, D+ is playing first seed. Sonics and Liquid is second seed out of Brazil, playing second seed out of their group Revan, but everything else is a first seed versus second seed, 1 versus 2, 1 versus 2, 1 versus 2, and 1 versus 2. Yeah, so 5 of them are technically first versus second seeds, and the other ones are first versus first or second versus second. But again, none of that really matters. It is just pretty much randomized teams from a group versus teams from a region, and none of the same regions going against each other. So love to see that. These all look like pretty fun matchups on paper. The only like close-ish region, I guess, is Liquid versus Revan. This is Brazil versus LATAM, but these guys are a fake LATAM team anyway, so it doesn't really matter, right? Okay, as far as my predictions, I'll go down the line, and I think there's a pretty clear favorite in pretty much all of these. Some are closer than others, but still. I think the lock-in picks, like the least close ones, seem like W7M versus Scars and Liquid versus Revan. Maybe that's underrating Scars. We don't know a ton about them, but still, an APAC team. What are you going to do? And Revan, it was a bit of a miracle that they made it here. I can't imagine that they're going to start taking down really good teams, but it is best of 1, so maybe. So my predictions, W7M over Scars, Sonics over D+, Liquid over Revan, Dark Zero over Falcons. This one maybe closer than some people might see it. Falcons, their limit hasn't yet been tested. They are lifetime in, at majors, at real international competition, and they played at Gamers 8 before. But again, if we're just talking about majors and whatnot, they're 2-0. They won 2 best of 1s here at this event, and they played nothing before that. So again, limit's not been tested. They're still playing best of 1s. I'm going to go with the more proven Dark Zero, though. I'll go FaZe over M&M, M80 over Wolves. I'm going to go Space Station over G2. Space Station is a first seed, G2 is second seed. I don't think that matters too much. G2, on paper, the better team. They're the reigning world champions, but just so as to break the mold a little bit here, to not go with the favorite in every matchup, I'll do it here, obviously because it's Space Station, but so as to break the mold anyways. And then I'll go Virtus Pro over Ninja Pajamas, even though Ninja Pajamas a little bit hot. They're coming off of back-to-back 2-0s, even if it's maybe not the best teams ever. I think they'll be especially invigorated by their revenge win over 6 Karma that they only dropped 4 rounds in total. But anyways, one more time, I got W7M, Sonics, Liquid, Dark Zero, FaZe, M80, Space Station, and Virtus Pro. We'll see. If I get them all right, except for G2 Space Station, my bad. But I wanted to be at least a little bit straying from picking all favorites. But okay, yeah, I don't think there's really really anything else to talk about. If anything really surprised you from phase 1, or if you thought I missed anything important, do let me know below. If you have your own predictions for phase number 2 here, feel free to say that as well, or just anything, you know, whatever comment you want to leave, feel free to do that. A like and a subscription would be very much appreciated. And with all of that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one.